Welcome to the channel. Today we are going to do a little battery testing with the Odin 2 Mini and the Odin 2 Pro model in this case, but it just shouldn't matter which of the Odin 2 models you have here. They all have the same battery and specs except for memory and storage. So what we've got here is we've got the Mini on the left. This is the Mini base model, and the Odin 2 on the right. We're going to load up Champions of Norath because it has a nice 3D title screen that we can leave this at for a while. And we have both handhelds set to maximum performance, which is what they call it, high performance mode here. And the fan on both is set to the smart mode, so the system can choose how fast to run the fan. And we're going to look at how long it takes the batteries to run down some. And we're also going to look at least, I don't have a thermal camera here, so I'm going to use the sensors on the handheld itself, and we're going to look at the temperature these handhelds will hopefully stabilize at. So I don't anticipate these handhelds overheating during this. And what I've done here to try to make the test at least as fair as possible, and the camera is not really showing this. You guys, if you follow my channel, probably know about my views on using what a screen looks like on camera as a judge of anything. But what I've done is I have adjusted the brightness on each handheld so that you get about the same apparent brightness. That gives you about 75% on the Odin 2 Pro here versus about 33, I think, percent on here. And what I did was I used my light meter to see if we're getting about the same brightness. As you can see right now, the brightnesses don't look quite the same, but part of that is the camera, part of it's the color temperature. These two have a slightly different color temperature, and you can certainly see that on the camera. But they're about the same apparent brightness. In fact, we may be giving a slight advantage to the regular Odin 2 here, because eyeballing it with the color temperature difference, it does look like, well, it does look like to me that the Mini is still a little bit brighter here. But anyway, I've adjusted it so the brightnesses are at least comparable to try to get a fair comparison, because the Odin 2 Mini screen is so much brighter inherently than the Odin 2 Pros is. But we're going to start up Champions of Norath on both devices, and we're basically just going to let this go to the title screen where it shows all these 3D graphics moving around. So we'll wait a bit. And of course, right now we have both of them hooked to power. They're both at 100% battery. And I have a stopwatch here that we're going to do some timing. Of course, we're not going to sit here and watch handhelds drain for an hour or two, but we will come back periodically to see how the handhelds are doing. We'll look at the temperature and the amount of battery drain we got. So far, it's not showing the battery on that screen. Yep, we have 100% battery on both devices. We are now in the three-dimensional graphics here that we'll let run for a while. And we have both the handhelds set at 3 times native resolution. We have no speed hacks of any kind turned on, so it's basically default emulator settings, but I've upped the resolution to 3x for both handhelds to give them at least a little bit of a workout here. So we will start the timer, and we will unplug both of the devices. Try to do this at about the same time. And we're off. We will check back right now. The Odin 2 is at about 50 degrees C. The Odin 2 Mini, again, by its internal temperature, is about 51, 53. They're pretty similar right now. The temperature is kind of fluctuating. But we will check back again a little bit later. So for right now, we will pause the recording. We are about 30 minutes into our battery check here. So I've got 29 minutes and 40 seconds. Let's start taking a look at things like temperatures. Looks like the regular Odin 2 is about 65.2 degrees C. And the Mini is about 65.4 degrees C. And let's get a look at those battery numbers. 87% for the Mini, 92% for the regular Odin 2. So we can see that at least so far, the regular Odin 2 rather exactly like we would expect is going to give better battery life than the Mini. Of course, given the size difference, this is not surprising, but it's nice to have some quantitative data. So we'll let this sit for a little while longer and come back and get some numbers in another half hour. So let's check in about an hour into this test. The Odin 2 Mini, 74% battery, and the regular Odin 2, 85%. Temperatures, basically 65.4 for the Mini, 60 and about 63.2 for the regular Odin. So it looks like the regular Odin might be running slightly cooler. Well, now it's going up to 64.4. So these temperature measurements here from the internal sensors are a little bit variable, but looks like both of these are holding temperature in the 60s so far. So we will check back again in another half hour. So let's check back in at the 90-minute mark. The Odin 2 Mini, 59% battery, and the regular Odin, 77%. Looks like our temperatures 66.6 degrees for the Mini, 64 degrees C for the regular Odin. So it looks like the Mini is running a little bit warmer, but again, doesn't look like they're overheating. It just looks like the Mini with its fan set to smart is running a little bit warmer than the regular Odin with its fan set to the same smart setting. Or it could just be a difference in the two sensors. I mean, I don't have a heat gun to confirm this, so I just have to take the system's word for their temperature. The Mini feels a little warm to the touch. For that matter, around the vents, so does the Odin 2. I think the Odin 2, the body overall feels a little cooler, probably partly because it's sitting further up off the ground than the Mini is, and the Mini doesn't really have much way to distribute heat over the bottom. But so far, get these centered back where they were. We'll check back in at 120 minutes or 2 hours. So let's check back in. It's been about 2 hours now, 120 minutes. And let's get a look at the remaining battery. 43% for the Mini, 68% for the regular Odin. Regular Odin temperature is about 64.8 or 65. Said these things fluctuate. I'm just going to write down what I saw initially. And the Mini, 62.2. You might wonder, the temperature seems to have dropped significantly since the last time. I had a thought the Odin 2 Mini is a lot flatter on the bottom than the regular Odin is. And the regular Odin, the grips kind of act as a little stand. And sitting on this mat, they keep underneath the handheld off of the mat, which might actually give the Odin 2 better airflow sitting on the ground. So to see if that had any effect, I sat my Odin 2 Mini on top of my camera's lens cap, and that elevated it off the ground a little bit. And apparently, what that has done is that it has given the Odin 2 Mini has a smaller port on the bottom for airflow. It's probably more important that that is kept clear. So I noticed that now the Mini is actually running slightly cooler than the regular Odin. So, lesson learned, it's important to keep that fan space free when you're running things that are fairly demanding, because if not, you don't have as big of a space on the back for air to get through the system. But now the Mini is running a good bit cooler. I guess the mat just wasn't providing enough airflow with it kind of sitting on the mat as the Odin 2 regular with its built-in grips. So at the 2-hour mark, it's 43% remaining battery for the Mini, 68% remaining battery for the regular Odin 2. Checking in at 2.5 hours or 150 minutes. The Odin 2 Mini, 28% battery remaining. The Odin 2 is 59%. As far as the temperatures go, according to the devices themselves, 60. Okay, that's fluctuating a bit. Looks to be about 63 degrees for both. But again, this just goes down to the reliability of the temperature sensors in here. But I do notice that the trend of the Odin 2 Mini being cooler now that it's been elevated off of the mat a little bit seems to still hold after the last run. So again, it is important to make sure that you have adequate ventilation for the Odin 2 Mini, which is not a problem if you're going to be holding it in your hand, but sitting in on a desk might be a little different. So we are back at about 3 hours. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but there it goes. The Odin 2 Mini is flashing its battery light. So we know what that means. The battery's going to go out soon. Now how soon, we don't quite know, but let's check in on the battery life of these. It is about time. So the Odin 2 Mini, 12% remains. Regular Odin 2, 51% remains. Temperatures, 64.2 degrees C, 64.8 degrees C for the regular Odin. So looks like the Odin 2 Mini is kind of running down here at around the 3-hour mark. We've got not a whole lot remaining, but we will tabulate these results and graph it all out and take a look at it in a bit. So after about 3.5 hours of fun, we come to the end of the battery testing. And one thing that I've seen a lot of on the internet with regards to these handhelds is what sort of charger should you get for them? You know, what capacity do you need? Well, here's what happens when you hook a 65-watt charger up to an Odin 2 Mini. And it's pretty drained right now. So, 3% battery? 3% battery left. So it should be charging at its peak right now. And I've observed this. I've charged these things several times, and I've monitored it with this charging meter right here. One thing you should notice here is it's charging basically at 25 watts. So however beefy the charger you hook to this is, as long as it can supply 25 watts, That's as fast as the Odin 2 Mini is going to charge. Now, in case you're wondering, is the Odin 2 any different? Spoiler alert, it isn't. So if I plug in the regular Odin 2 here, you can also see it's pretty down. It's down to 41%. So it should be charging pretty rapidly here. And in fact, if you look on the screen, it tells you it's charging rapidly. Not saying right now fingerprint not recognized, but whatever. You can also see here, it's also basically charging rapidly at 25 watts. So whether you buy a 100-watt charger, whether you get a 65-watt charger or a 45-watt charger, I've tried this with several chargers. This is the charger that actually charges my Ally. So it certainly will supply the wattage. And you're going to get 25-watt charging, period. So do you need to waste money buying a 100-watt charger just for an Odin 2? The answer is no. These things are going to charge at about 25 watts no matter what you do. And of course, as these things get closer to full, the wattage will drop off a bit. But in my observations, testing it with a meter, it never rises above that. So 25 watts is what you get for fast charging either Odin 2 model. So, since it's been a while since we started, let's look at the test parameters for our battery test. We use Champions of Norath for the PlayStation 2. We use the opening titles because for quite a lot of handhelds, these are actually pretty challenging to render. It gives the handheld a good workout. We use 3x resolution to make sure that the Odin 2 had some stuff that it needed to do. And we're using NetherSX2, the 4248 based version, which I've just found runs some of the higher end games a little bit better than the classic version, so that's the one I use. For both devices, we had Wi-Fi on, we had Bluetooth off, and we were using high performance mode because we wanted to maximize the frame rate and we didn't want any performance drops. We're using Smart Fan. We're letting the Odin 2 decide how quickly to run the fan. You can also use other modes if you want to. Now, why did I use high performance? Well, I wanted to give these handhelds a workout. So for the Odin 2 Mini, I used 33% brightness. What I did was I kind of compared them visually in a darkened room, and I set it so that the two would have about the same brightness. I set the Odin 2 to 75%, and I kind of adjusted the Odin 2 Mini to look kind of similar in the darkened room. Of course, when I actually looked at it under the lights, it did look like, and you can kind of see it on the camera, that the Odin 2 Mini, even at 33%, is still, to some extent, a little bit brighter than the Odin 2 at 75%. There is a really big difference in the maximum brightness of these two displays. So you could probably increase the battery life on the Mini a bit by, if you wanted to, lowering the brightness even more. As long as you were inside in a reasonably lit or dark room, you could lower this more. A lot of times I play with it at 25% and it's fine. So that's something you might could do to increase the battery life. The Odin 2, 75%. I really don't like to play with it very dim because I actually happen to like bright displays. So, just a reminder of the test parameters. Let's take a look at some of the results. Now, of course, I had the results written down on a kind of a little notepad over here, but to make it a little easier to look at, let's just look at a graph. So, the Odin 2 Mini is in blue. The regular Odin 2 is in orange. And you can see, of course, we start up at 100% battery remaining because we started off with them plugged in and fully charged. And you can see that on a percentage basis, the Odin 2 Mini is dropping a good bit faster than the regular Odin. This is not a surprise at all because, well, we know that the Odin 2 Mini has a significantly smaller battery. And the drop wasn't quite linear. You can kind of see that there. Although, just for simplicity, I used a linear fit for calculating an approximate battery life here. So I fit the data to a straight line in both cases. You can kind of see that The Odin 2's battery drop is not quite perfectly linear either, and but it's close enough to give us a good approximation. We let this run a while, and so what we see here is we start getting really, really low on the Mini. I think that ended up being about the very last point, which I didn't record on the video, but it was right when I about turned everything off. It got to down to about 7% at about 3 hours and 6 minutes, and the Odin 2 ended up being about 49% at the same point. So at about 3 hours and 5 minutes, we were a little under halfway through the battery life of the Odin 2. So what I did with these is I used this equation, the curve fit, to calculate an estimated time to completely run out the battery. Now again, this is not going to be perfect because how when you get close to the bottom of the graph, is the response still going to be relatively linear? Well, I'm not going to let it run to literally 0% to find out. I don't like to completely discharge my batteries if I don't have to. So I use the graph here, and looking at the results of the test, well, we did talk about temperature if you watched the beginning of the video. Both systems appeared to stabilize pretty well. If we're looking on the result sheets here, what we can see is once I actually put the Odin 2 Mini up on top of my little lens cap here to get it off of the pad, before that it was about 66 degrees. After that, it stabilized at around, let's just call it 63. The Odin 2, which kind of has its own riser, the Odin 2 was pretty much 64-ish degrees the whole time. So looks like the cooling is pretty adequate for PlayStation 2 emulation. It doesn't look like it's getting hot and thermally shutting down or anything like that. Looks like it's performing fine. The handhelds feel a little bit warm to the touch, but they don't get to the level of, oh my God, I'm going to burn my hands. So they do get warm, but apparently not so warm that the cooling can't handle it. At least conducting this, if I'm sitting outside on the beach and it's 90-something degrees, well, we might get some thermal throttling then. But certainly in a reasonable environment, I believe it was 75 degrees Fahrenheit in here when we did these tests. So in a reasonably air-conditioned environment or not in the direct sun, these things probably cool well enough. But the Mini, if you're laying it on a flat surface, there is only the one vent on the bottom here, and you might want to make sure that's not blocked for the Mini, because my pad apparently blocked it a little bit and it was a few degrees warmer. Still, the cooling was handling it even with the even sitting on the mat, but it was running warmer until I gave a little bit of room underneath here to get some more airflow in. Now, by the numbers, the original Odin 2 battery is 1.6 times the size of the Mini battery. So we got 8,000 milliamp hours versus 5,000. Now, in this test, using my curve fits, we got about 1.75 times the Mini's battery life. So, again, this may be due to the small difference in brightness, maybe due to the better display in here consuming a relatively higher amount of power. Who says the Mini LED is actually more efficient than the traditional backlight? That the nice thing about the Mini is you can run it in bright conditions, and you can run it you can turn the screen down even more here. But it's looking like, at least under the conditions in this test, the Mini wasn't running quite as efficiently as the regular Odin 2. And again, that might just be due to the screen brightness, which ended up looking a little different under the lights than I thought initially. So based on the curve fit from the data, The Mini's battery life on this test, it would have conked out at 3 hours and 25 minutes. You would have gotten down to 0%. For the Odin 2, really close to 6 hours, about 5 hours and 58 minutes based on the fit to the data I have for the Odin 2. So the Odin 2 didn't get twice the Mini's battery life, which it shouldn't have, but it actually did get more than 1.6 times. And again, this could just be the brightness thing. Maybe there's something else, or maybe just the differences in the efficiencies of the screens. But the Champions of NORAD test, here's your estimated battery life. Now, what does that mean for portability? Well, if you want to go all day on the Odin 2 Mini with a challenging game, you're going to want to bring some sort of battery pack with you. And this little guy here is actually a 10,000 milliamp hour pack, so you can juice your Odin 2 Mini back up a couple of times. Of course, you can do the same thing with this, but yeah, this is a bit bigger to carry around, even when you compare adding in the battery pack. So you're definitely trading with the Odin 2 Mini. You're trading that battery life for the portability, for the Vita-looking form factor. So, hope you guys enjoyed the battery test of the Odin 2 Mini versus the Odin 2. If you like this content, please remember to like the video. If you have any questions or comments, comments are always open. And if you want to see more gaming and handheld content, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.